Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the patch preview for 11.17. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check us out streaming on Twitch now. Every night, starting around 11 or 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 2 or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come by, check it out. It's friendly. It's a lot of fun. I'm still going to keep doing a lot of YouTube content, but we've just decided to take the live streaming over to Twitch. We've been having a good time with this, so come by and check that out. And check out the rest of the content on the channel as well. We do fresh patch notes and tier lists for every patch. And then I'll also cover some other games as well, like Total War Warhammer, some Burning Crusade Classic, and then I'm going to be covering some Final Fantasy 14 as well. So if you enjoy my content style and you want to, check me out in other games, then that's going to be available as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. Sorry, the camera, the way this is set up on the computer, it's clipping a little bit of the top. In terms of what you can see, but you're not missing anything. It just says League of Legends patch 11.17 there, system nerfs, and then you can see Divine Sunder just barely under the camera, but I don't want to mess with it, so you're not missing anything. Okay, we don't know the specific numbers, and I suspect they're probably going to release that in a couple of days, but I know people are going to ask me about this tonight, so figured I'd go ahead and just take a look at it, and just offer some really quick commentary on it. And just as a reminder to tell people to go check me out on Twitch who haven't figured it out that we're on Twitch yet. Okay. So Divine Sunder, good. They need a nerf. Any of these, like life stealing, you can do a lot of damage and be tanky at the same time. They just need to nerf those items. There's just way too many champions can do too much damage while also being too tanky and too mobile at the same time. Those are kind of the three pillars of balance. A champion should not have all three, and many champs have all three: mobility, survivability, and damage. You should have to pick, two of those, or if you do one of them exceptionally well, one of those. Something like a Kog'Maw, historically, right? Tons and tons of damage, but low mobility and historically low survivability. But with some of these builds like Shield Bow, Wit's End, and some people even get Randuin's on him at some point. Now, those aren't like super problematic items outside of maybe Wit's End. But that's the kind of stuff that shouldn't be happening because it really messes up the balance of a lot of champions. That the things that did keep them in check, usually either their immobility or, their glass cannon status or their low damage, all that's getting thrown out of whack. So the items have just been really messed up, especially this season and particularly in the last, 5 or so patches. Okay, so Divine Sunder, they're nerfing that. I like that. Serpent's Fang, it's a little weird. I feel like this is usually a bait item. Maybe it's better than I think. But it never puts up great numbers. I don't think I've seen it break 1,000 shield or something almost ever. It's usually just in the triple digits. So I feel like it baits a lot of people to get that item to try to counter stuff like Sterix, like Shield Bow, and I just don't think it does it as well as a lot of people would like. But I don't know. Maybe it's just very cost efficient by itself. Maybe it has a high win rate. They just decided to go ahead and nerf it. I think that's fine. And Wit's End, yes, they do need to nerf this item because it's just showing up on way too many champions. Even in games where the enemy doesn't have a lot of magic damage, people will still get it, which doesn't make any sense. This should be it's just a very confused item, I think, right now, because you have the innate sort of defense in it, right? The magic resist. So in theory, you would think if you're trying to create an item, you would say, okay, this is supposed to be an item for bruisers or maybe AD carries who want to have a little bit of offense, but also want to have some magic resist. So sort of like a Hex Drinker historically, or like a Maw Malmortius, but maybe a little bit more tilted towards attack speed champions like ADCs, right? But the problem is it does so much damage right now anyways, right? With the 40 attack damage and the attack speed on it and the on-hit damage and the fact that it gives you the 20 bonus movement speed whenever you land an attack. So this is just giving you those three pillars all in one item again, right? You're getting extra mobility on champions that usually don't have it. You're giving a lot of extra damage because you have three different sources of damage. You have the on-hit, you have the attack speed, and you have the attack damage. And you have pretty high resistances with the 50 magic resist. And a lot of times that doesn't even matter. Once again, some of these champs that have these special sort of on-hit interactions who don't need crit, basically, in their builds can get this item. And so even people who do need crit, like I just mentioned, Kog'Maw, where crit's like pretty good on him, right, can get shield bow plus this and be very difficult to kill. So I think that's ultimately a good nerf. What I would do is I would probably start by just taking off the movement speed. There's no reason that it needs to have movement speed on it, because that doesn't serve the purpose of the item if the purpose is to be you have some offense, but it's mostly picked as a defensive choice against a heavy magic damage team. You don't need movement speed for that, right? Just give them 2 pillars instead of the 3 pillars, right? Just survivability plus damage is fine. I suspect what they're going to do is just revert that 10 AD buff that they gave it a few patches ago, which might be fine as well. Then you're knocking down the damage on it, but I think it's just a poorly designed item overall. Okay, so they're buffing Hullbreaker. Item seems like okay in situations where we've seen it, but again, it's a really weird, sort of confused item in what its purpose is supposed to be. I guess it's like split pushing for tanks. I really wish they would just bring back like Banner or ZZ Rot Portal. I thought those were much more unique effects. And instead, just make those effects okay. If you want autonomous split pushing, which is what those offered, just make the stats awful. I think there should be more items like that where the stats are pretty bad, but the active is really useful and unique. I think Redemption is the item that's done this the best over the years. Now, it's been imbalanced at times, but the stats are horrible on it for the most part, and it has a cool active for team fights that can miss. Like, enemies can dodge it, and allies can run out of it, and it has enough lead time, the 2.5 seconds before it lands, where you really have to predict where people are going to be. So it has fail cases, right? Like, it can miss, it can fail, it has a long cooldown, and the stats on it are horrible, and it's a unique effect. It's also countered by Grievous Wounds. So I think that items like that are far better. Locket is okay, but Locket can't miss, and it's a shield, and there's less counterplay to shields. But anyways, I would just like to see more of that, rather than let's just pile all of these stats on these items, like Divine Sunder, right? And let's just make them just really powerful just because they have a hell of a lot of stats that are OP, right? Like, I wish we would go back to just kind of quirky active items that are cool and useful, like ZZ Rot, Banner of Command, trying to think of something else, like the Spooky Ghosts. I thought that was a cool item at times. Now, people thought it was too much vision control or too strong. I would just like to see them balance and work around that and just like create more unique effects rather than just load it up with stats. So Hullbreaker's okay, but I think at the end of the day, it's just going to become another boring stat stick item that just happens to break towers a little bit faster. Okay, and then Yomu's Ghostblade. Honestly, forgot this item even exists, and the reason, it just doesn't have any survivability on it. So, like, why would you ever get this when you could just get any number of the other, items that are really OP, that have lifesteal on it, or that have extra health, or something like that. So, yeah, just pretty much nobody gets this item. I think solidifying that as, giving a lot of speed might be something that'd be unique and interesting about it. So I hope they just like increase the movement speed on it or lower the cooldown or something like that to encourage, more mobility rather than just sticking a bunch of extra damage on it. We'll see. They might just give it 5 AD and call it a day. It's kind of lazy balancing, but it's what'll probably happen. Okay, champ nerfs. Graves. He has been kind of doing, I feel like anecdotally in my games, I haven't looked at the stats, but he does feel like he's pretty strong, especially he's getting played in like mid lane against some of these bruisers and top lane, and I feel like he does pretty well, and in the jungle he's doing all right. I don't think it needs to be a hard nerf. They'll probably just take away the 2 AD they gave him or something like that, give him plus or minus 2 or 3 AD, but that's okay. Irelia, yes, absolutely nerf this champion. She's way over the top. They've just given her way too many buffs. That one patch a couple of patches ago, it was like 10 buffs or something like that. It was just insane. I can't even remember everything they did to her. But she's just like one of the, ever since her rework, she's one of the major violators of the 3 pillars that I just mentioned. She has heavy mobility with resets, really high damage, and has a lot of survivability. I think it's personally with those types of champions like the Irelias, Akali's, like these high mobility, flashy sort of champs, I think it is way more interesting if you make them higher skill cap by giving them less survivability. So I would like to see them do something like that where they either hitting base stats is really kind of lame. I would hit some of her healing. I think she still has healing on her Q, I believe. Or like nerf her W. Just nerf the amount of damage you can block with the W. They could also nerf the damage on it. But I would hit her survivability and just force her to rely more on mobility and outplay potential. But I don't know. I mean, a huge problem why Irelia is so strong is all of the different items she can get that give her a ton of survivability. Now, I think that hitting Divine Sunder will help some, but I think she can also take Gore Drinker and still be really effective. And Sterix, I don't know why Sterix is not on here getting nerfed, because that's one of the chief offenders. Because whether someone gets Divine Sunder or Bloodthirster or Stride Breaker or whatever, Sterix almost always comes into the equation because it just gives you like 1200 effective health among other things when you include the shield. So it's just ridiculous. So I would like to see a nerf to Sterix, but anyways, it depends on what they do with her, but I kind of wish they'd nerf the items and that would nerf her. But definitely hitting some stuff in her kit would be good. Blue Cane, well, they're already nerfing Serpent's Fang, which is popular on him. Again, I think nerfing Bloodthirster, or not Bloodthirster, what is it? Y'all know what I'm talking about. The melee AoE Gore Drinker. There we go. That's what I meant in terms of Irelia. I don't remember what I said, but I mean Gore Drinker. So yeah, I don't know what they do with him. Maybe they lower his movement speed a little bit. I guess they could lower his damage. I don't think he's like super problematic. I think he's a sign of the times, right? With just taking Gore Drinker and still doing a crap load of damage and being really hard to kill, where you're supposed to have to choose Red Cane to do that, right? But Gore Drinker's just so OP right now with Conquer and just all of this other free healing that you can get out of the runes. So I guess you can nerf him. Leona, thank God, this champion's just been too strong for too long, especially in higher elo play. I realize her win rate in medium to lower elo is a little bit less, but it's still pretty good. It's like 51 or 52%. So it's not crazy, but her cooldowns are just way too short. I would nerf her ult to 120. I would take it from 90 seconds to 120. I know it's a pretty big nerf, but that's commensurate with all of the other champions that have engage for the most part, whether it's Nautilus or Recon or just a lot of other champs that, you know, have a really long range ultimate engage. That's the case with them. So I would do that, or you could nerf the cooldown on her E or her Q. But something about the cooldown needs to get nerfed. I suppose they could also hit the resistances that you get off of W. But the most meaningful thing would be just to lower her uptime. Because once she gets so much cooldown reduction or ability haste, as it's called now, she can keep you locked up basically indefinitely in a fight. Because her, you know, her chain is going to be, if she hits you with ult and then goes in with her E and then Qs, you're going to be locked up for 3.5 or 4 seconds, and that's almost long enough for her to hit you again with an additional Q. And then the E is almost going to be off cooldown. So I would almost like to see them go back. Back in the day, her Q used to start at 9 seconds also, and her E started somewhere around there, 9 or 10 seconds. And then if you put points into the Q, it lowers the cooldown and does extra damage. You put points in the E, it lowers the cooldown and does extra damage. But one of the big things that brought her to life was just making the Q a flat 5-second cooldown. And again, that uptime is so ridiculous when you think about, you know, Recon early on, it's 18 seconds on his W. Thresh's hook, you know, early on, I think it's like 20 seconds. Blitz's hook, 20 seconds, right? All of these champs, there's a huge window of vulnerability if they miss their skill shot. Leona, you know, her E, I think, starts at 13. So she just has way too much uptime, and that's what I would like to see them nerf about her. Okay, Viego. I think they said they're going to nerf something about his resets, and that's what I would probably do. It's just, the going invulnerable, healing for a ton, getting all of their skills and their item actives. So if they have a Sterix or something, or just whatever item actives, it's just way too strong. So, and I'm not sure what they do. I think he heals for a certain percentage. I would probably just remove the heal. Just give him the resets. He can heal in other ways. If he wants to take Triumph, or if he wants to itemize into Gore Drinker, or something like that, let him heal himself. I would not give him those resets. The other option would be, like, put some time between the resets, so it has a cooldown of, like, 10 seconds or something, so he can't just chain them all together. But I know that's part of the fun with him. It's probably would be hard to get rid of his untargetableness, because that's just kind of built into his code, and that's how he works. So I think the best thing to do is either completely get rid of the healing whenever he assumes someone's form. Maybe they could make the healing on the end after he leaves their form, so when he goes in, if he wants to heal, he has to leave almost immediately. But I would nerf the healing built into that, and I think that might work. You could also give him some kind of modifier, like when he's in someone's form, he does 20% less damage or something like that. That seems a little clunky. I'd probably just nerf the healing and see where it goes from there. We'll see what they do. Zed doesn't seem like he's that much of a problem right now. I don't know. High skill cap assassin. He does well in some games for sure. I guess they could take away some of his safety by nerfing the cooldown on his W. Maybe early on. Maybe force him to put points into his W if he wants to have more mobility. Something like that. So that is the buff they gave him over the last half a year or so. They lowered the cooldown on his W quite a bit, so maybe they just revert that. That's kind of the way their balance team has been going recently, is if they give something a buff and then it turns out to be like too strong in a few patches, then they just revert whatever they recently buffed, which I guess is the easiest thing to think about. But again, seems a little on the lazy side, but it says Fleet Footwork is also getting 11-17 buff, so that's good. It's an unused item, or it's an unused rune for the most part. I think that's a much more balanced, sustained item, because you don't get any extra damage out of it. So I don't think Conqueror should heal at all. Although Conqueror realistically doesn't heal that much in most games that I've noticed. But just take the healing off of Conqueror, give it some extra damage if you need to. Fleet should be the go-to. I want to have sustain for the laning phase, and you get a little bit of mobility too, but you don't get damage. And I think that's a nice way to balance it. Okay, so Echo champion buffs. Don't buff this champ, man. He's so annoying. I don't know. His win rate's not that high, I guess. And like mages in general are having a hard time. He doesn't usually get things like the Gnasher's Tooth. That's become, pretty popular on stuff like Gwen and Diana. And they have nerfed his items a lot. I mean, he is a cool champ. He is fun. He is interesting. But he just feels like, if it's a good player, that it just feels like there's almost no counterplay to him, other than the standard, like, Master Yi counterplay, right? Which is, well, just CC him. He's not that good if you just chain CC him for 10 seconds and kill him. It's like, yeah, but dude, in solo queue, so many people are not going to be taking CC or layering it properly if they're under Diamond, especially, which is like 99% of the player base. So, I guess, if they have to buff him, just give him, like, some stats. Just give him a little more armor or magic resist for the laning phase. I would not buff his damage or increase his mobility or just anything significant. Just nudge him a little bit to help him in the laning phase if they really feel like that's necessary. Evelyn, don't buff her either, man. Why are they buffing these champs? These, like, obnoxious champs. I know Toos really likes Evelyn, and she's fun when she's going around on your team murdering everybody. But again, she's just a solo queue menace, man. No one wants to play against Evelyn. Like, with her cloak, just the control, just getting your allies to buy control words is just so terrible, and she does so much damage, she doesn't even need to use her ult when she gets fed. So I feel like she's not even that bad right now. So I guess, they could give her maybe a little bit more base armor, kind of like Echo, just to help her first couple of clears. I would not make them faster, I would not increase the damage on her Q, but just have her maybe get a little bit more health, so that she can't get invaded and blown up as easily. Maybe that's a decent compromise. But in general, I just do not like the design of that champion. Just the perma stealth is just bad. Like, I think it should be something like Twitch-esque, where she has to activate it, and even if she gets it for an extended period of time, I just think that there should be like more to it. Maybe after she kills somebody, she gets a reset on it. Like, I think Twitch's stealth is obnoxious and really annoying, but I think that it's a little more balanced than Evelyn's stealth. Just because if you have deeper wards, you can see her. Now, I know you can kind of see, like, if you're able to get priority and ward Evelyn's camps, you can see her. I'm aware of that, but I don't know. Lassandra, okay, she's been kind of in a bad place. She's a control mage. Very few people are playing control mages right now. She does almost no damage. Her mana costs are way too high. I would like to see them lower the mana cost on her abilities. I think she'd actually be a pretty interesting support if she had lowered mana costs. But we'll see what they do with that. And then Cinna, I guess, buffer. I don't really... She's so hard to balance because I don't think they want fasting Cinna, because that's just kind of like almost like a balanced loophole. But she's one of the only people that takes advantage of that. So I would just nerf her like combat capabilities without the souls. Just give her a higher baseline reliability. Maybe you could increase her attack speed a little bit, just so that she gets some benefit out of attack speed. They've done that in the past. So, I mean, I think honestly they could probably bump her up to Caitlyn level attack speed, and that'd probably be fine. I don't think they're going to go that extreme. But I don't know. There's any number of things they could do with her. They could just nudge her damage a little bit. I hope they don't just like give her an AP ratio and try to bait people into going AP on her. But yeah, we'll see what it does. I just hope that it's not like a buff to the souls to encourage that kind of playstyle, because then people try to emulate that in solo queue, the fasting Cinna thing, and it just does not work out very well in Diamond and lower. People, like, half the time the support's not paying attention, it's not on board with it. That's happened to me before. I didn't notice someone was doing fasting Cinna, and I'd already bought my and I was already in lane with my warding item, right? And so now we both have warding items, and like one of us has to sell it or we're going to take a loss, and then you have to rely on your ADC to try to manage the wards, and like Cinna's not very good at going around and warding because she can get like engaged on and blown up. So you'd much rather have your Alistar or your Rakan or something doing your warding, but the support can't ward because they can't buy a warding item early on if the Cinna has it. So it just creates all these like really weird interactions, and I know it's cute, like the fasting Cinna, it kind of changes the meta a little bit bottom lane. I just don't think it's very well suited towards solo queue, and even if you tell people it's bad in solo queue, they're still going to want to do it because their favorite pros are doing it. So I just think having a huge difference between pro gameplay and solo queue gameplay is not great, especially structural stuff like that. So that's why I'm hoping they don't buff the souls. Teemo, okay, champion has a hard time. I would like to see them lower the cooldown on his W, just to give him a little bit more movement speed more often so he can kite better. They could buff his shrooms, but that's a little dangerous. I think Teemo's at his most interesting when the shrooms are powerful, so I wish they would shift some power away from his on-hit into his shrooms. And the biggest thing I would like to see, as far as the shrooms are, is give them like the same vision as wards, or at least significantly more vision than they currently have. And that way, because he's called the Scout, and then he would have, you know, a really good utility. Even if you don't increase the damage on the shrooms, now you can, you know, get your lane priority with your ranged lane dominance and then go start warding up the enemy jungle with your shrooms. I think that would be great. And then he would actually fulfill a great role of, you know, a vision dominant champion. He could even be played as support like that because you'd have a lot more vision. But there is counterplay to it because, you know, the enemy can sweep them. And I don't know, they could lower the time on it if they did that. I think the shrooms stick around for like a million years right now. Just lower the time on it. Just make it like 2 minutes or something. Or even like 1 minute. If you lower the mana cost on them and lower the cooldown on them, maybe it could even be 1 minute if you gave it a lot of vision. I don't know. But I think that would make him something unique, and that would give him like some very interesting utility if he actually was a scout, if he actually had the mobility to go up and got significant vision off of the shrooms and then could retreat as well. Maybe when he auto-attacks people, his move quick could go down on cooldown or something like that. I don't know. But I just would like to see his play pattern shifted more towards that, being a scout, relying on the mushrooms, using some of that poke, rather than being like an auto-attack, semi-ADC type of champion. Okay, and then we have Xayah. Alright, she did get a buff with her ult a while ago. I think she's okay in pro right now, so I would be a little careful buffing her up. As someone who plays a lot of Recon, obviously I'm really going to personally like the Xayah changes, but if I'm trying to be unbiased, I don't think she needs that many buffs. She's just hard to play in lower elo. I don't know what the buff would be. Lower the cooldown on her E, maybe, on the drawback, so she can try to set that up more often. They could increase her W, but those are just flat stats, and that could make she and Recon just too oppressive in the lane. So we'll see what they decide to do. I mean, they could lower the cooldown on her ult even more. I think it's probably fine where it is. I think, didn't they bring it down to 130 or 140? So yeah, I think she's okay. I don't think she needs that many buffs, but champion adjustments. Okay, we just don't know what these mean. If these are nerfs or buffs or what. So they'll release those in the next couple of days. But Akshan, I guess, is okay. I've seen games where he's really good. I've seen games where he's bad. So he's kind of a wash in my mind. Omumu. I would like to see them lower the cooldown on his ult. I mean, I know it's powerful. Lower the radius on it if you need to. If you think it's too good in, bronze or something. Just lower the radius on his ult. But I would lower the cooldown. I think didn't they revert it to a root? It used to be a stun, and now they made it a root again. I guess they could do that and make it a stun again. But yeah, he's so ult dependent. You have to have that ult to function. And I would just make it the same as Malphite. I mean, I think Malphite's very close. He needs an ult as well, but his is 130, I think, to start instead of 150. So I would take Omumu down to 130. You do have to be a little careful because he was really good with the items at the start of the season, and he was buffed, and he had a 60% win rate or something because Sunfire was so OP. But that item has been nerfed, and so have most of the other items as well. So, anyways, we'll see what they do. Gangplank, I think, is fine. I don't know why they're adjusting Gangplank. I guess we'll see what that is. I have no idea what they're going to do with him. And then Lucian, I don't really know either because I feel like he's bad as an ADC, but he's can be decent as a solo laner. So maybe they try to give him better scaling for late game. But maybe they try to tap down some of his damage early on. So maybe his passive can scale, start off weaker, but scale to be much better late game. That would be maybe one way to try to handle it. Because I think he is oppressive early. He just doesn't translate leads super well later on in the game. But he's an interesting ADC. He's really mobile, requires these kind of different combos, so to be really effective. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Stay tuned over the next couple of days when we get the actual numbers. Then I'll do another breakdown for you. Come by, check out Twitch starting around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.